This is a crocodile wearing gold. Gem bracelets, rings in its ears, hand-fed honey cakes by a priest holding its jaws open. And on this list, it's one of the tame ones.
These are 10 animals our ancestors had no business taming, and tamed anyway.
Counting down from 10 to 1. All right, let's dive in. Number 10, the cassowary. The deadliest bird alive, raised by hand in the Ice Age. In 2021, the archaeologist Christina Douglas and an international team published a study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences that pushed the story of humans raising birds thousands of years deeper into the past than anyone had imagined, and attached it to the single most terrifying bird on the planet. Working with more than 1,000 fragments of fossilized eggshell, excavated decades earlier from 2 rock shelters in the highlands of New Guinea called Yuku and Kiowa, the team found evidence that as early as 18,000 years ago, Ice Age foragers were not just eating these eggs, they were very likely hatching them and raising the chicks. The bird in question is the cassowary, and to understand why we're opening the whole countdown with it, you have to understand what a cassowary is. It is a huge, flightless bird, a relative of the emu and the ostrich, with a vivid blue neck, a bony helmet on its head, and a reputation as the most dangerous bird on Earth. On the inside toe of each foot, it carries a long, dagger-like claw, and a frightened or cornered cassowary can deliver a kick powerful enough to disembowel a human being. It is regularly described as the closest thing the living world has to a velociraptor. This is not a barnyard chicken. This is an animal that can kill you. That danger is not hypothetical. There are 3 species of cassowary, the largest standing close to the height of a person and weighing as much as a grown man. And the reputation rests on an actual body count. A teenage boy was killed by a cassowary kick in Australia in the 1920s. And as recently as 2019, a man in Florida was killed by a captive bird he kept. The inner claw can be the length of a kitchen knife. The bony casque on the head, its exact purpose still debated, whether for display, for pushing through dense undergrowth, or for amplifying the deep, booming calls the birds make, only deepens the impression of something that has walked, unchanged, out of the age of dinosaurs. The comparison to a velociraptor is not just showmanship. This is genuinely one of the most physically dangerous animals a person can stand near.
And our ancestors, 18,000 years ago, chose to bring its eggs home and raise its chicks.
The genius of the study is in how they read the eggshell, because eggshell turns out to be a quiet archive. As a chick develops inside an egg, it draws calcium from the inner surface of the shell, and that process leaves microscopic changes that record how far the embryo had grown when the shell was broken. Using 3D microscopy and a model first built from emu and ostrich eggs, Douglas's team could look at each ancient fragment and estimate the stage of development at which that egg had been opened. And the pattern they found was not random. The overwhelming majority of the eggs had been harvested in the late stages of incubation, close to hatching. That single fact opens 2 possibilities, and both are extraordinary. Some of those near-hatched eggs were clearly cooked and eaten. They bear burn marks, and a near-term egg with a fully formed embryo inside is eaten as a delicacy in some cultures to this day. But many of the late-stage shells showed no burning at all, which is consistent with something else entirely. Eggs deliberately collected near-term and left to hatch. And if you are hatching them, you are, in all likelihood, rearing the chicks. As the researchers put it, this may represent the earliest indication anywhere in the world of humans managing the breeding of a bird, predating the domestication of the chicken by something like 8,000 years, and the goose along with it.
What makes it not only possible but plausible is a quirk of cassowary biology.
Like many birds, a cassowary chick imprints on the first moving thing it sees after hatching. A chick raised by humans from the moment it breaks the shell will bond to them, follow them, and grow up tame. It is the wild adult, not the hand-raised one, that is lethal. So an Ice Age forager who collected an egg at just the right moment and let it hatch in camp could end up with a tame cassowary. And a tame cassowary is a walking larder and treasure chest. Meat when needed, and prized feathers, quills, and leg bones that, in New Guinea, were valued enough that cassowaries are still traded as commodities today. That last point is not a guess, and it is what gives the whole study its backbone, because the practice the eggshell hints at never actually stopped. In the highlands of New Guinea today, people still go out to collect cassowary eggs, still hatch them, and still raise the chicks, feeding them, keeping them, and ultimately using them for their meat and their valuable plumes, with the long leg bones once worked into daggers and tools. The bird is woven into trade and ceremony and social life. So when Douglas's team looked at 18,000-year-old eggshells and saw a pattern of late-stage harvesting, they were not imagining some lost behavior out of nothing. They were seeing the deep prehistoric root of something the descendants of those same foragers are still doing in the same forests. The continuity stretches across 18,000 years, and the method deserves its own moment because it is genuinely elegant. Eggshell is one of the most overlooked materials on an archaeological site, usually swept aside as food waste. Douglas had spent years realizing it was an archive. To read it, the team first studied the eggs of living birds whose development they could track: emus, ostriches, turkeys, mapping exactly how the inner surface of the shell changes as a growing chick draws calcium from it, day by day. With that calibration in hand, they turned high-resolution, three-dimensional imaging on the ancient New Guinea fragments and could place each one on that developmental timeline. This egg was opened early. This one was almost ready to hatch.
Out of 1,000 humble scraps that earlier excavators had bagged and ignored,
They reconstructed a pattern of human decision-making from the last Ice Age. Which eggs people ate, and which they let live. And the significance of that, if it holds, is hard to overstate, because it rewrites part of the story of how humans and birds came together. The domestication of the chicken, the bird that now outnumbers every other on the planet, is usually placed within roughly the last 10,000 years in Asia. The goose and the duck come later still. This cassowary evidence sits at 18,000 years, deep in the Pleistocene, on the great vanished landmass that once joined New Guinea and Australia, where people had already been living and shaping tropical forests for tens of thousands of years. It suggests that the impulse to take charge of a bird's breeding, to decide which eggs become dinner and which become the next generation, did not begin with farmers and barnyards at all. It began with Ice Age foragers in a rainforest, and the very first bird they tried it on was not a docile little fowl, but the most dangerous bird alive. The behavior we think of as the dawn of poultry was, on this evidence, thousands of years older and far stranger than the textbook version. And, careful as the study is, this is an inference, not a proven fact, which makes it the right place to set the rule for everything that follows. The study does not claim domestication. The cassowary was never domesticated, then or since. There are no cassowary skeletons in ancient huts, no drawings of penned birds. What there is eggshell, read with real ingenuity, pointing to people who harvested eggs near hatching and probably raised some of the chicks. The team itself says, may have. It is a strong, evidence-based maybe. And that gap between the bold headline and the careful evidence under it is exactly what we'll be testing on all 10 of these animals. We are starting the countdown here for a reason. Of all 10, This is the one that delivers the full promise of the idea most completely. Genuinely prehistoric, genuinely impossible sounding, and genuinely supported by fresh, rigorous science. 18,000 years ago, while the Ice Age was still gripping much of the planet, before farming, before pottery, before the wheel, before a single chicken had ever been kept by anyone, someone in a New Guinea rainforest knelt over a clutch of eggs belonging to the most dangerous bird in the world, judged which were ready, and chose some to eat and some to let hatch and raise by hand. The first bird humanity ever reared was not a meek little fowl. It was a feathered killer with a blade on its foot, and we were tending it while the mammoths were still alive. Number 9, the crocodile. The man-eater that wore a queen's jewelry. Around the middle of the 5th century before the Common Era, the Greek historian Herodotus traveled through Egypt, and in the region of a lake city the Greeks called Crocodilopolis, he saw something he could barely believe. The priests there kept a sacred crocodile, and they did not keep it at a distance. They fed it by hand. They hung golden ornaments and molten glass jewels in its ears, fitted bracelets around its front feet, and gave it a diet of bread, meat, and wine carried to it on the priest's own hands. When it died, they embalmed it and laid it in a sacred tomb. The animal at the center of this was Sobek, the crocodile god, lord of the Nile's water and fertility and raw power. And his cult town in the Fayum, known to the Egyptians as Shedet, was built around living crocodiles believed to be the god made flesh. The chief sacred crocodile even had a title, Petsuchos, the son of Sobek. And when one Petsuchos died, another living crocodile was selected and adorned to take its place. This was not a one-off curiosity. It was a religious institution that ran for centuries. And the scale of it is staggering because the Egyptians did not just keep a few temple crocodiles, they bred and mummified them by the hundreds of thousands. At sites like Tebtunis and Kam Ombo, archaeologists have pulled out crocodile mummies in industrial quantities. Adults wrapped in careful linen, but also juveniles, hatchlings, and even eggs and unhatched young, prepared as offerings to the god. An entire economy grew up around raising crocodiles specifically to kill, embalm, and sell to pilgrims. Here is what makes it remarkable rather than merely strange. The Nile crocodile is not a tame animal in any natural sense. It is one of the most prolific man-killers on the African continent, an ambush predator that kills hundreds of people a year, even today, with a bite force that can crush bone like a twig. And the priests of Sobek kept these creatures placid enough to decorate with earrings and hand feed in front of crowds, almost certainly through constant feeding, careful management from hatching, and animals so gorged and habituated they had no reason to strike. The Egyptians themselves were divided about the crocodile, which is part of what makes the taming so pointed. Herodotus noted that in some parts of Egypt, the crocodile was sacred and pampered, while in others, around Elephantine in the south, people simply ate it. The same animal was a god in one town and dinner in the next. And where it was worshipped, the devotion was total and industrial. Modern CT scans of crocodile mummies have shown that many were young animals raised specifically to be killed, embalmed, and sold to pilgrims as offerings to carry into the temple. Some with the remains of their last meal still inside them, others that appear to have been deliberately killed by a blow to the skull. The Egyptians had effectively built crocodile farms in the service of a god, raising the most dangerous reptile in their world on a scale that required real, practiced, fearless handling. Now the honest part. This is not prehistoric. It is literate historical Egypt, with priests, records, and a Greek tourist taking notes. And tame is doing gentle work here. These were managed, pampered, half-divine captives, not pets. But that is exactly why the crocodile lands this high. It is the clearest, best documented case on the whole list of humans deliberately gentling an apex predator. And they did it not for food or for hunting, but to drape a living man-eater in gold and call it a god. Number 8. The bear. The animal they raised as a child and killed as a god. Among the Ainu, the indigenous people of Hokkaido in northern Japan and the lands around it, there was a ceremony so emotionally extraordinary that it is difficult for an outsider to hold in the mind without flinching. It was called the Iomante, the bear-sending ceremony, and it began with an act of almost unbearable tenderness and ended with an act of ritual death. And to the Ainu, these were not in conflict. They were two halves of the same sacred gift. It started with a hunter taking a brown bear cub, often from its den. The cub was carried back to the village, and there it was not penned at the edge of the settlement like livestock. It was brought into the home and raised as a member of the family. The cub slept in the house, ate at the family's table, and played with the children. In some accounts, when it was very young, the women of the household nursed it at the breast alongside their own infants. For a year, sometimes two, the bear was raised, quite literally, as one of the family's own children. Loved, fed, indulged, and known. And the adoption was total, which is the heart of what makes this entry almost unbearable. This was not a captive animal kept in a cage and occasionally fed. Ethnographers who recorded the practice among the Ainu describe a cub treated with real tenderness, handled, talked to, allowed to tumble with the village children. In the very early days, sometimes suckled by a nursing mother who had milk to spare. The household genuinely grew attached to it. And the bear, for its part, raised from infancy among people, grew up tame and trusting, with no reason to fear the hands that fed it. By the time it was big enough for the ceremony, the people performing it were not killing a wild beast they feared. They were sending away an animal they had come to love. And the grief recorded at some of these ceremonies was real grief. The tenderness was not a prelude that ended when the ritual began. It ran right through the ritual itself. And then, when the bear had grown large and strong, came the Iomante. In a solemn and elaborate ceremony, the bear that had been raised as a child was ritually killed, and its spirit was sent back, released with honor and gifts and ceremony to return to the world of the Kamui, the gods.
In the Ainu understanding, the bear was never merely an animal.
It was a divine being, a god who had come to visit the human world wearing the body of a bear, bringing the gift of its meat and its fur. To raise it lovingly and then send its spirit home with the proper rites was not a betrayal of the animal. It was the highest honor you could pay a visiting god, a way of thanking it and ensuring it would return again. How deep into the past this reaches is one of the genuinely tantalizing questions in the archaeology of human-animal relationships. Bear ceremonialism is not unique to the Ainu. Strikingly similar reverence for the bear, including cub raising and ritual killing, appears in a great arc across the circumpolar north, among peoples of Siberia, among the Nivk, in the folklore of Finland and northern Europe. That wide distribution hints at a shared tradition of tremendous antiquity, something carried by many peoples from a very old common root. And in Japan itself, the prehistoric Jomon culture left behind bear imagery and figurines, which some scholars argue suggests the roots of this bear reverence reach back into deep prehistory, perhaps many thousands of years. The ceremony itself was as elaborate as it was solemn, and worth understanding in its detail, because the detail is where the strangeness lives. When the day came, the village did not simply dispatch the bear. It was brought out and honored as the guest of honor at a great feast, addressed with prayers and gratitude, offered food and rice wine, and then killed in a precise ritual manner. In many accounts, pinned between logs and dispatched with ceremonial, often decorated arrows, so that its spirit could be released cleanly. Afterward, there was feasting on the bear's meat, the sharing of which was itself a sacred act, and the animal's skull was kept and honored, set up so that the departing spirit would carry home a good report of how well it had been treated. Every step was designed around a single idea, that the bear was a god who had agreed to visit, and that the whole point was to host it generously and send it home happy, so that it, and others like it, would choose to come again. The same logic appears, uncannily, thousands of miles away. The peoples of the Ob River in Siberia held bear feasts. The Nivk of the Amur and Sakhalin raised and sacrificed bears in ways the Ainu would have recognized. Even in Finland, the killing of a bear was once surrounded by elaborate rites and a feast called the Karhunpääjäiset, with the skull hung in a sacred tree. When a single, highly specific idea, raise the most dangerous predator in your world as kin, then ritually send its spirit home, turns up independently across the entire top of the globe, it strongly suggests you are looking at something genuinely archaic, a thread of belief older than any of the cultures that carried it into recorded memory. Now, that deep prehistoric dating is an inference, drawn from Jomon art and from the wide circumpolar spread of the practice, while the Iomante itself is documented in detail, mostly from recent centuries, ethnographically, among living Ainu. We cannot point to a Stone Age bear nursery and prove it.
But the pattern is suggestive enough that this almost certainly is an ancient form of human-animal relationship.
Not a recent invention. And it is, without question, the strangest and most emotionally difficult form of taming on this entire list. Everywhere else, taming is about use, food, hunting, status, protection. Here, it is about love and the sacred, fused with death in a way that a modern person can barely process. They took the cub of one of the most dangerous predators in their world, and they raised it with genuine tenderness, as their own child, knowing the whole time that they would one day kill it. Because to them, raising it and sending it home were the same act of devotion. They loved the bear like a child, and killed it like a god, and saw no contradiction, because in their world there was none. Number 7, the lion. The pharaoh who took his into battle. On the towering walls of Abu Simbel and the Ramesseum, the temples of Ramses the Great, around 1270 before the Common Era, the pharaoh had his greatest moment immortalized in stone. The Battle of Kadesh, his clash with the Hittite Empire, carved at colossal scale with Ramses at the heart of the action in his chariot. And in some of these depictions, and in the inscriptions that accompany them, there is a detail that sounds like pure myth, except that the Egyptians kept insisting on it. Beside the pharaoh, in the chaos of battle, there is a lion, a tame lion, the texts say, that fought at the king's side, and which the inscriptions honor with a fearsome name, rendered in some accounts as something like slayer of his foes. Egyptian kings, it is well attested, kept tame lions. The lion was the ultimate royal animal, a living embodiment of the pharaoh's own power and ferocity. Tame lions were kept in the palace. Pharaohs were depicted hunting alongside them, and the imagery of the king as a lion, or accompanied by one, runs deep through Egyptian royal symbolism. This was not unique to Ramses, and it was not unique to Egypt. Across the ancient Near East, the lion was the beast of kings, and keeping one, calm and close, was among the most potent statements of authority a ruler could make. Centuries of evidence back the basic practice, right down to physical proof. In 2004, archaeologists at Saqqara found the mummified skeleton of a lion, confirming that these animals were not only kept, but honored in death. What makes the lion sit so high on this list is the sheer audacity of the claim attached to Ramesses, layered on top of the recognizability of the animal itself. Everyone knows what a lion is and what it can do, A single blow from a lion's paw can break a man. Its jaws can crush a skull. And here is a king claiming not merely to keep one in a cage, but to walk with it, to have it lie beside his throne, and to ride into the most important battle of his reign with the animal running alongside his chariot as a war beast. It is the maximum possible expression of the idea at the center of this whole countdown. Dominion over the undomesticable made into a public performance. Ramses was not the only pharaoh to reach for that symbol, and the lion ran through Egyptian kingship from the very beginning. The earliest rulers were already identifying themselves with the lion's ferocity. The war goddess Sekhmet, bringer of plague and protector of the king, was depicted as a lioness. Royal furniture, thrones, and ceremonial beds were built in the shape of lions. To keep a real one was to make that ancient symbol flesh. And the practice was genuinely widespread among the great kings of the region. Across the Near East, in Assyria and beyond, lions were the beasts of royalty, kept, hunted in staged royal hunts, and displayed as proof that the king could master the strongest predator in the land. The lion sitting calmly at the foot of the throne was a statement every neighboring ruler would instantly understand. In Assyria, the obsession reached its peak.
Kings like Ashurbanipal kept lions in captivity specifically to release them in great ceremonial hunts. Scenes carved in breathtaking detail on the palace walls at Nineveh. The king spearing lions from his chariot, the dying animals rendered with an almost unbearable realism. The Assyrian hunt was not sport in the modern sense. It was a sacred performance of kingship, the ruler demonstrating before the gods and his people that he and he alone could stand against the embodiment of chaos and destruction and win. To keep lions, to hunt them, to walk among them, was to claim a power that was almost divine. And the symbol is genuinely ancient. At the very dawn of Egyptian history, on the ceremonial palette of King Narmer, the imagery of the king as an unstoppable predator is already there. For 5,000 years, from Narmer to the Caesars, the message never changed. The man who controls the lion is more than a man. And we have the bones to prove the keeping was real.
In 2004, in the necropolis at Saqqara, the archaeologist Elaine Zeevy's mission uncovered the complete skeleton of a lion in a human tomb, the first such find from ancient Egypt, an animal that showed signs of having lived a long life in captivity before being honored with burial in a sacred human space. That single skeleton cuts through all the propaganda and the mythology and leaves something undeniable. Egyptians really did keep lions, really did keep them long enough to grow old, and really did regard them as worth a place among their honored dead. But this is the entry where the skepticism matters most, because Ramses II was, among other things, one of history's great propagandists. The Kadesh reliefs are not a neutral record. They are a monument built to glorify the king, and Ramses notoriously presented the battle, which was in reality something close to a draw, or arguably a strategic failure, as a personal, godlike triumph. The war lion fighting at his side belongs to that same machinery of myth-making. It is meant to project the pharaoh as a living force of nature, attended by the king of beasts. We should treat the battlefield lion as royal propaganda, not documented zoology. It helps to know what actually happened at Kadesh, because it shows the propaganda machine at full tilt. In 1274, before the Common Era, Ramses marched north against the Hittite Empire and walked into a trap. His army was strung out and nearly overrun, and the king found himself, by his own telling, almost alone amid the enemy before rallying. The battle ended without a clear winner, and the two empires eventually signed what may be history's first surviving peace treaty. Yet on temple wall after temple wall, Ramses had it carved as a sole, superhuman victory, himself enormous in his chariot, the enemy tiny and crushed beneath him.
Into that scene of curated glory strides the lion,
labeled in the inscriptions with a ferocious name, rendered in various readings as something like the lion that slays his enemies. The lion is not really a zoological note. It is a crown made of muscle and teeth, placed beside the king to say, "Even nature's deadliest hunter fights for me." And yet, strip the propaganda away, and the hard fact underneath does not vanish. Pharaohs really did keep tame lions. The lion mummy is real. The palace lions are real. Whatever embellishment surrounds the battle, the core remains genuinely astonishing. Ancient kings kept the most dangerous big cat in Africa calm enough to lie at the foot of a throne and walk on a tether through a palace. An animal that could kill a man in a heartbeat, gentled into a living crown, worn by a king to show the world there was nothing he could not master. Number 6. The baboon. Ancient Egypt's police force had fangs. In the tomb of a 5th dynasty official named Tepemonk at Saqqara, carved around 4,500 years ago, there is a relief that has launched one of the most startling claims in Egyptology. It appears to show a baboon, held on a leash, lunging forward and sinking its teeth into the leg of a fleeing man in a marketplace. A man who, in the scene, seems to be begging for mercy. The interpretation that has captured the public imagination is vivid and almost comic in its audacity. That ancient Egypt used trained baboons as a kind of police force, monkeys deployed to chase down and apprehend thieves in the market. Ancient Egypt's police dogs, in this telling, were monkeys. It is not a baseless fantasy, because the Egyptians genuinely had a deep and complex relationship with baboons.
They were sacred animals, associated with Thoth, the god of writing and wisdom, and with the sun. Baboons were observed screeching at dawn, and were imagined to be greeting and worshipping the rising sun. The Egyptians kept them, trained them, and mummified them in enormous numbers. Some tomb paintings appear to show trained monkeys being used to harvest figs, scrambling up trees to pick fruit and hand it down. A people who could train a monkey to pick figs, and who kept baboons close enough to mummify by the thousands, were, at the very least, in the business of managing these powerful, intelligent primates. Those fig harvesting scenes deserve a closer look, because they are the strongest evidence that Egyptians really did put monkeys to work. In several tombs, registers of painted decoration show monkeys up in the branches of fig and dom palm trees, while human harvesters stand below. And in some, the animals appear to be handing fruit down, or being directed by their keepers. Egyptologists still argue over exactly what these scenes mean, whether the monkeys are genuinely trained pickers, or are stealing fruit, or are a half-symbolic flourish. But the very existence of the convention shows that the image of a monkey doing a human's bidding was familiar to Egyptian eyes. Layer onto that the baboon's sacred weight. The baboon-headed Hapi, one of the 4 sons of Horus who guarded the organs of the dead. The dog-faced baboons shown adoring the sun. The god Thoth himself sometimes taking baboon form. And you have a society that saw these primates as clever, capable, semi-divine beings, fully woven into the machinery of daily life and the afterlife alike. And powerful is the word. A large male baboon is not a gentle creature. It carries canine teeth that, relative to its body, rival a leopard's. Long, curved daggers it will use without hesitation. The image of one of these animals being aimed like a weapon at a human target is unsettling precisely because it is so plausible. A baboon could absolutely maim a person. The question is only whether the Egyptians actually used them that way. The depth of the Egyptian relationship with baboons makes the question harder, not easier, because they kept these animals on a scale and with a reverence that is hard to overstate. The Hamadryas baboon was sacred to Thoth and bound up with the worship of the sun. The Egyptians imported them from far down the Red Sea coast, from the land they called Punt, and a remarkable modern study of the chemical signatures in mummified baboons traced some of them back to the Horn of Africa,
meaning these animals were shipped across hundreds of miles of sea and desert to live and die in Egyptian temples. They were bred, kept, trained, and then mummified in their thousands and stacked in dedicated catacombs.
A civilization that goes to that much trouble? Importing a dangerous primate from across the known world, keeping it for life, and embalming it for eternity, clearly had baboons woven deeply into daily and sacred life. The animals were not exotic rarities glimpsed once a generation. They were a familiar, managed presence. And this is where we have to slow down, because the police baboon reading is genuinely debated among Egyptologists, and it should be presented as interpretation, not established fact. The market scene can be read other ways, as a hunting scene, as a punishment being carried out, as a depiction of a trained animal performing, or as something symbolic whose meaning we have lost. We are, once again, reading a story into a carving. Baboons are also notoriously difficult and dangerous to control, which makes a routine, organized baboon police force a stretch. So let's be clear about what is solid and what is not, because this entry sits right at the line between fact and viral myth. What is solid? The Egyptians kept baboons, trained them to some degree, used monkeys in at least some working roles, and held them sacred enough to mummify in their thousands. The relief exists. A leashed baboon really is shown with its teeth in a fleeing man's leg. What is not solid is the leap from that single image to an institution. The idea, repeated all over the internet, that ancient Egypt ran a baboon police force as a matter of policy. That is one person's striking interpretation of one carving, not something attested in any text or law. The honest position is to hold both halves. The picture is real and astonishing, and the sweeping claim built on top of it is a maybe, not a fact. But strip the claim back to what is certain, and what remains is still remarkable. 4,500 years ago, an Egyptian artist carved a leashed baboon biting a man's leg and placed it in a nobleman's tomb as an image worth preserving for eternity. Whatever the exact scene meant, these people kept baboons close enough and trained them well enough that a monkey sinking its fangs into a fleeing human was not an absurd image to them. It was something they recognized. Number 5, the cheetah. The fastest animal alive, and a wild one every single time. By around 3100 before the Common Era, in both Sumer and Egypt, two of the earliest civilizations on Earth, the elites had begun keeping an animal as the ultimate status companion and hunting partner, the cheetah. And the way they used it was pure theater.
The cheetah would be fitted with a hood over its eyes to keep it calm, carried out to the hunting grounds on horseback or by chariot. And then, when prey was sighted, the hood was pulled away and the animal was released to do the one thing nothing else on land can do: run down a gazelle at speeds approaching 70 miles an hour, faster than any other creature alive. The cheetah became, across the ancient and medieval world, the royal hunting animal par excellence. The tradition ran for thousands of years and across continents, from Egypt and Mesopotamia into Persia and eventually to Mughal India, where the Emperor Akbar is said to have kept a stable of hundreds, even 1,000 hunting cheetahs at once. To own and hunt with a cheetah was to announce that you commanded the speed of the world itself. The cheetah also happens to be, by the standards of big cats, unusually suited to this kind of partnership, which is why ancient kings reached for it rather than for a lion or a leopard as a hunting animal. A cheetah is built like a sprinter, not a brawler. It is far less inclined to turn on a handler than the truly heavy cats. It cannot even roar. It purrs like a house cat because of the structure of its throat. And a young one, taken in hand, will grow genuinely affectionate and calm, walking on a leash and riding without panic. The Old English name for it, the hunting leopard, captures the role exactly. On the hunt, the choreography was precise and beautiful. The hooded cat rode out perched on a cart or behind a rider, was carried within sight of a herd of gazelle or blackbuck, had its hood swept off, and exploded into a chase that was over in seconds. The fastest land animal on Earth running down the fastest prey it could find. Afterward, it was rewarded, calmed, rehooded, and carried home, to be sent out again another day. But the cheetah hides a secret that makes its entire history almost unbelievable, and it is the thing that lifts it up this list. The cheetah was never domesticated. Not in Egypt, not in Persia, not in India, not anywhere, in 5,000 years of being kept by kings. And the reason is biological. The cheetah barely breeds in captivity. Its courtship is complex, its genetic diversity is famously low, and for most of human history, nobody could get tame cheetahs to reliably reproduce behind palace walls. Which leads to a staggering consequence. Every single hunting cheetah, across all those millennia and all those empires, had to be caught fresh from the wild, taken as a young adult and tamed by hand, one animal at a time, over and over again, generation after generation, because the supply could never be bred and had to be endlessly replaced from the wild.
The scale of that becomes vivid at the far end of the tradition, in Mughal India. The Emperor Akbar in the 16th century was the greatest cheetah keeper in recorded history. By some accounts, he kept around 1,000 hunting cheetahs at his court, and over his long reign, he is said to have kept many thousands in total. And in all of it, in decades of keeping 1,000 cheetahs at a time, with every resource an empire could provide, his menagerie is recorded as having produced a single litter of cubs, just once. One litter from thousands of animals across a lifetime. That number, more than any other, captures the wall every cheetah keeper hit. The animal would run for you, return to you, sit hooded and calm beside you on a cart, and do everything but the one thing that would have made it truly yours. It would not make more of itself in your care. The cheetah's strange genetics are the reason. At some point in the deep past, the species passed through a severe population bottleneck that left all living cheetahs startlingly similar to one another genetically. So similar that the species struggles with fertility to this day, which is part of why captive breeding remained almost impossible until very modern techniques. The kings of the ancient world had no idea any of this. They only knew that the fastest, most elegant hunting animal on Earth could be tamed, but never farmed. And so they kept sending trappers back out to the grasslands, century after century, to catch more. The thing to flag here is that taming is not domestication. And with the cheetah, that distinction is not a quibble, it is the entire story. A domesticated animal is one we have remade over generations into a creature that breeds in our care. The cheetah refused that. It allowed itself to be hooded, carried, gentled, and run. It would cooperate with a human in the most intimate way, sprinting and returning. But it would not become ours. It would not breed for us. And there is a dark coda to that refusal. This endless capture of wild cheetahs for royal sport, century after century, helped drain wild populations and is part of why the species teeters today. The fastest animal that has ever lived spent 5,000 years as a hooded passenger on royal saddles, and not one of those countless animals was ever truly domesticated. Every cheetah that ever hunted for a king was born wild, caught wild, and tamed by a human hand, and then, within a few short years, replaced by another. Number 4. The fox. The companion we buried with 4,000 years before the dog. In the small river valley of Wadi Ziklab in northern Jordan, a team led by the archaeologists Lisa Maher and Edward Banning, working with the University of Toronto and Cambridge, excavated a site called Uyun al-Hammam, one of the oldest formal cemeteries known anywhere in the world. And in 2011, in the open access journal PLOS One, they described one grave from that cemetery that quietly upended a story we thought we knew about humans and animals. A person had been buried, around 16,500 years ago, alongside a red fox. Let that date settle for a moment, because it is the whole point. 16,500 years. This is deep in the last ice age, before agriculture, before pottery, before villages, before the wheel. And crucially, it is roughly 4,000 years older than the earliest known burial of a human with a dog. At a moment when the dog as we know it did not yet exist, someone in Jordan was laid to rest with a fox.
What makes the grave more than a coincidence is what the bones revealed about the care taken. The story, as Mar reconstructs it, is intimate and strange. The fox was buried with its person. Then, at some later point, the human's remains were dug up and moved to a new grave nearby. And when the people did that, they moved the fox too. They could have left the animal behind. They did not. The bond between this person and this fox was apparently significant enough that, even in death, even when the grave was reopened and the body relocated, the fox had to go with them so that the two would not be separated in the afterlife. The interpretation the researchers offer is that this fox was kept as a companion, a pet in the oldest sense of the word, and buried to accompany its owner into whatever came next. If that reading is right, then the fox, not the dog, may have been humanity's first animal companion. The setting makes the claim stronger rather than weaker. Uyun al-Hammam was not a random scatter of bones. It was a genuine cemetery, holding the remains of at least 11 people, returned to and reused, with deliberate grave goods, ground stone tools, a bone implement, pieces of red ochre, animal parts placed with intention. These were people who buried their dead with care and meaning, thousands of years before the farming societies usually credited with inventing that kind of ritual. Into that world of careful burial, they placed a fox. And foxes are not easy companions. The red fox is a high-strung, skittish, independent animal. The famous Soviet experiment that began in the 1950s under the geneticist Dmitry Belayev showed that turning a fox into a reliably tame, dog-like animal takes many generations of deliberate selective breeding. It is not something you achieve with a single hand-raised individual.
So whatever bond formed at Uyun al-Hammam was almost certainly a one-off. A particular person and a particular fox, tamed by patience and proximity, not the start of a domesticated line. That is also why the dog ultimately won and the fox did not. When humans did form their lasting partnership with a canine, it was with the wolf, an animal that lives in cooperative packs with a social hierarchy a human can step into. And the earliest known human-dog burials, like the famous Natufian grave where a person was laid to rest with a hand resting gently on a puppy, come thousands of years after this fox. The fox was the road not taken. It was an earlier, more fragile experiment in companionship that never bred true and never spread. But here is where honesty matters, and the researchers themselves are careful about it. Pet is an interpretation of a burial, not a proven fact. We are reading intention into the arrangement of old bones.
And foxes are genuinely difficult animals to tame. The famous Soviet fox breeding experiment showed it can take dozens of generations of selective breeding to produce a reliably friendly fox. This relationship, whatever it was almost certainly short-lived in historical terms. The fox never became the dog, never crossed the line into domestication, never bred true into a tame lineage. It was a dead end. But it was a real one. And dead end or not, the grave tells us something profound about the people who dug it. To bury an animal with a person, to reopen that grave and carefully move the animal so the two would not be parted, is not the behavior of beings who saw the world as mere food and threat. It is symbolic thought. It is the belief that a bond between a human and an animal meant something that outlasted death and deserved to be preserved. We tend to credit that kind of rich inner life to much later peoples, to the farmers and city builders who left us temples and writing.
But here it is, 16,500 years ago, in a handful of Ice Age hunter-gatherers in a river valley in Jordan, who looked at a fox and felt something worth carrying into eternity. 4,000 years before anyone lay down for eternity beside a dog, a person in Ice Age Jordan formed a bond with a wild fox so strong that when we moved the human, we could not leave the fox behind. Number 3, the hyena. The bone crusher we tried and failed to turn into a hound. On the walls of Old Kingdom tombs at Saqqara, carved around 4,500 years ago, there is a scene that stops modern viewers cold. Servants are shown wrestling striped hyenas onto their backs, pinning the powerful animals down and force-feeding them, stuffing whole birds and chunks of meat down the throats of creatures that, in the wild, could take a man's arm off. Row upon row of hyenas appear in some reliefs, trussed and fed, in what looks unmistakably like an organized effort to manage them. For a long time, Egyptologists read these scenes in two possible ways, and both are revealing. The first is that the Egyptians were fattening hyenas for the table, keeping them penned and force-feeding them the way the Romans would later fatten dormice, raising them as a strange delicacy. The second, more ambitious reading, is that this was an attempt at taming, an effort to break and train the hyena into a hunting animal, a living weapon to run down game, the way dogs were already being used. You can see why the idea would have been seductive. The striped hyena, and its larger spotted cousin, possess one of the most powerful bites of any land mammal, jaws built to shatter and consume bone that other predators leave behind. A tamed hyena hunting at your side would have been a formidable partner, stronger jawed than any dog.
If you could control it, you would have something no rival could match. These scenes also sit inside a broader Egyptian practice that makes the food reading very plausible. The elite tombs at Saqqara, those of officials like Mereruka and T, among the grandest private tombs of the Old Kingdom, are decorated with detailed scenes of the estate fattening all sorts of animals for the table. Oryx and gazelle led by the horns, cranes and geese force-fed by hand, cattle stuffed to bursting. The hyena force-feeding belongs to that same world of intensive animal fattening, which is a strong hint that, at least in part, the Egyptians were raising hyenas to eat them, cramming food down their throats the way they did with everything else. A hyena dinner is strange to modern ears, but to a culture that ate hedgehogs and cranes, it was just another protein. And that, rather than companionship, may be most of what these unsettling scenes are really showing. There is a living proof of exactly where the limit lies, and it is found today in the Ethiopian city of Harar. There, for generations, certain men have hand-fed wild-spotted hyenas every night, sitting in the dark at the edge of the old city, holding out strips of meat, sometimes from their own mouths, to enormous wild predators that come trotting in from the hills. It is one of the most astonishing human-animal relationships on Earth, and it proves two things at once. It proves that a hyena can be habituated to a human, made comfortable enough to take food from a hand. And it proves the wall just past that point, because those Harar hyenas are not pets, not tame, not owned. They are wild animals that show up for an easy meal and vanish back into the night. And the men who feed them know exactly how dangerous they remain. The spotted hyena's jaws generate a bite measured among the most powerful of any land mammal, capable of cracking the leg bone of a buffalo. You can feed that. You cannot command it. But the record itself tells you how the experiment ended. These force-feeding scenes belong to a particular window of Egyptian history, and then they fade out. Later Egyptians did not keep hyenas as hunting companions. There is no tradition of the domesticated hyena, no lineage of tame ones, no hyena that became to Egypt what the dog became to everyone. And the most likely reason is simple biology. Hyenas do not bond with humans or submit to a pack hierarchy headed by a person, the way dogs descended from wolves do. You can overpower a hyena and stuff food down its throat. You cannot make it love you or obey you or breed a line of animals that will. There is a wider truth lurking behind that failure, and it is one of the quiet facts of natural history. Of all the world's large predators, the hyena is among the very few that no human culture, anywhere, has ever domesticated. We turned the wolf into the dog, the wildcat into the house cat, the aurochs into cattle. We tamed elephants and cheetahs and lions as individuals. The hyena alone resisted every approach. To the Egyptians, it was also an animal of the wild margins, of the desert beyond the ordered world. And there may have been something in that, a sense that the hyena belonged to the chaos outside the fields, and could be dragged in and fattened, but never truly brought across into human society. Every culture that met it came away with the same answer: the hyena would not be ours. So the caveat here comes twice over. Tamed is generous. The reliefs may show fattening for food rather than any real taming. And even in the most ambitious reading, where Egyptians genuinely tried to make the hyena a hunting partner, the attempt flatly failed. But it earns its place precisely because it is a failure, and failures are honest in a way successes are not.
Somewhere in the Old Kingdom, people looked at the bone crusher of the African knight and thought, we could tame that. They wrestled it onto its back. They force-fed it in the tomb painter's world. And then the scenes stop. And that silence in the later record is the sound of the experiment quietly not working. Number 2, the mongoose. The wild thing we simply invited inside. A cobra rears up in the corner of a mud brick house, hood flared, ready to kill a child. And something small and low and fearless streaks across the floor straight at it, dodges the strike, darts in, and kills the most feared snake in Egypt. That animal lived in Egyptian homes on purpose, invited in, and it is the strangest kind of tame thing on this list, because nobody ever really owned it. In households up and down the Nile, the ancient Egyptians kept a small, low-slung, sharp-faced predator loose among their rooms. Not caged, not leashed, but free to come and go. And they valued it for one reason above all. It killed the things that could kill them. The animal was the Egyptian mongoose, the ichneumon, sometimes nicknamed Pharaoh's rat, and its job was pest control of the deadliest kind. It hunted rats and mice in the grain stores, and most prized of all, it killed snakes, including cobras, whose venom was a constant household threat in a land that worshipped and feared serpents in equal measure. The Egyptians were so impressed by the mongoose's war on snakes that they wove it into their mythology. The ichneumon rearing up to strike a cobra became an image of the sun god himself defeating Apophis, the great serpent of chaos that threatened to swallow the sun each night. Bronze figurines of mongooses were cast as votive offerings. And, the surest sign of Egyptian affection, they mummified them, wrapping the little hunters in linen and laying them to rest in the animal necropolises alongside cats, ibises, and baboons, so that they too might pass into eternity. The ancients told tall tales about how the mongoose did its work, which tells you how much it impressed them. Later writers like Pliny the Elder claimed the ichneumon would roll itself in mud to form a kind of dried-on armor before going into battle with a cobra, and, most fantastical of all, that it would dart straight into the open jaws of a basking crocodile and kill the great reptile from the inside. None of that is literally true, but the legends grew up around a real and genuinely fearless little animal, one that will take on a cobra many times its length and usually win, fast enough to dodge the strike and tough enough to shrug off venom that would kill a person.
To a household terrified of snakes, an animal that hunted cobras for sport was nothing short of miraculous. The mongoose belongs in this countdown because it shows the loosest, most informal end of the taming spectrum, and it is worth being honest that this is the softest case on the entire list. The Egyptians did not domesticate the mongoose the way they did the cat, and the contrast with the cat is the whole lesson. The cat made the same bargain the mongoose did. It wandered into human granaries to hunt the rodents that gathered there, but the cat stayed, settled in, bred under human roofs, and was gradually reshaped over generations into the domestic animal that now sleeps on half the beds in the world. The mongoose was offered the identical deal and never took the final step. It kept its distance, kept its wildness, came for the snakes and the mice, and left again. There is no evidence of selective breeding, no transformation of the animal over generations. What they had was something more like a standing truce, a wild predator that found human houses full of food and snakes, and humans who were more than happy to leave the door open for it. Tamed here means tolerated, encouraged, and loved, but never truly owned. It was one member of an entire Egyptian menagerie of semi-wild companions that ran from monkeys and baboons to gazelles, hoopoes and other birds, and, on the royal end, big cats. A culture that kept more of the wild world close to it than almost any before or since. But the love was real, and that is the point worth ending on. You do not carefully wrap a rodent hunter in funeral linen and send it into the afterlife unless it mattered to you. The mongoose was never our property and never our creation. It was a wild animal we admired enough to welcome into the home and mourn at the grave. The gentlest, least binding kind of taming there is, which is simply the decision to let something wild stay. Number 1. The elephant. The grave that proves someone caught a giant. In the desert at Hierakonpolis in southern Egypt, the archaeologist Renee Friedman spent years excavating an elite cemetery known as HK6, a burial ground for the powerful that predates the pharaohs, the pyramids, and even Egyptian writing itself. It dates to around 3700 to 3500 before the Common Era, well over 5,000 years ago, deep in the predynastic past. And among the human elite buried there, Friedman's team uncovered the grave of an animal that should not have been there at all, a young African elephant. The elephant alone would be astonishing, but it was the details that turned it from a curiosity into evidence of something deliberate. When the team examined the animal's gut contents, preserved in the dry desert ground, they found what it had been eating in its final weeks: acacia branches and other fodder, in quantities and combinations that pointed to one conclusion.
This elephant had not been killed in the wild and dragged home. It had been held in captivity and fed by hand for weeks, possibly months before it died. And then there is the age, which is the cleverest clue of all. The elephant was about 10 or 11 years old. That is a very specific number, because 10 to 11 is roughly the age at which young male elephants are pushed out of the matriarchal herd, expelled, left to fend for themselves, suddenly alone. A lone adolescent elephant is the one moment in the animal's life when it is both catchable and, in principle, trainable. The animal in that grave was taken at exactly that window. Whoever captured it appears to have known precisely what they were doing. It did not stand alone either.
HK6 was a kind of mortuary menagerie of power. The predynastic elite of Hierakonpolis surrounded themselves in death with exotic and dangerous animals, and the excavations there have turned up baboons, hippos, wild aurochs cattle, wildcats, and even a leopard, kept and buried as living symbols of the owner's reach and dominance. To possess a creature you should not be able to possess was, even then, the ultimate statement of status. And the logistics alone tell you how serious this was. An elephant, even a young one, is not a casual acquisition. A growing elephant eats on the order of 100 kilograms of vegetation a day and drinks enormous quantities of water. Keeping one alive in the dry Nile Valley, away from the wild forage it would normally roam miles to find, means people were cutting and hauling fodder to it in bulk, day after day, for as long as they kept it. This was not a trophy that someone shot and propped up. It was a living animal that a whole group of people committed to feeding and maintaining. An investment of labor that only makes sense if owning the giant carried real meaning. In a world right at the threshold of the First Kingdoms, the ability to capture, hold, and display the largest animal anyone had ever seen was a way of saying, without words, that your power extended even over that. And elephants were not always the distant exotic they later became in Egypt. In that early period, the wild range of the elephant reached closer to the Egyptian world, and animals could be obtained from the fringes of the Nile lands and the regions to the south. The very name later given to the southern island of Elephantine preserves a memory of elephants and the ivory trade at Egypt's edge. So the young elephant at Hierakonpolis was not necessarily dragged across a continent.
But capturing one, transporting it, and keeping it alive was still an extraordinary undertaking. And the elite who managed it were drawing on the same networks that brought them the other exotic creatures in those graves. The baboons, the wildcats, the leopard, assembling, in effect, the first menageries, collections of captured wild power maintained purely to show that they could be. Here the caveat runs the other way from the temple animals. We cannot prove this elephant was tamed in the sense of trained to obey, ridden, or worked. What we can prove is narrower and almost more impressive. That more than 5,000 years ago, before Egypt was a unified state, before hieroglyphs, someone caught a young elephant at the precise age it could be taken, kept it alive on cut fodder, and valued it enough to give it an elaborate burial among the most important people of the age. This is also, unlike the temple crocodile, genuinely close to prehistory, predynastic, pre-literate, at the very edge of recorded time. They reached out and took hold of the largest land animal on Earth, and we are reading the proof of it in the contents of its stomach. Finale. 10 animals. 10 times that human beings looked at something they had no business touching. A man-eating crocodile, a bone-crushing hyena, the fastest cat alive, the deadliest bird alive, a bear, a lion, a wild fox, and reached out anyway. Line them up and a pattern appears that the title alone doesn't tell you. Almost none of this was domestication. The cheetah would not breed for us. The hyena would not bond. The fox stayed a fox. These animals were tamed as individuals, gentled one at a time, over and over, but never remade into a tame species the way the dog and the cow and the sheep were. This is not the story of the animals that built civilization.
It's the other story. The taming that didn't scale, the bonds that didn't breed true, the experiments that ended in a grave or on an altar. The word prehistoric is generous for part of it too. Much of what we've seen is historical Egypt, not the deep past. The cases that truly reach into pre-written time are the rarer, stranger ones. The elephant in its pre-dynastic grave, the bear ceremony with roots that may run to the Stone Age, and above all, the two oldest of everything we've seen. A fox buried beside a person in Jordan 16,500 years ago, and a cassowary chick raised by hand in New Guinea 18,000 years ago. Because those two are the ones that tell you the real story. We tend to think of the bond between humans and animals as a product of civilization, something that came with farms and villages and settling down. But the fox in that grave is 4,000 years older than the oldest dog burial, and the cassowary is older still.
The impulse to reach across the line, to take the wild thing into the home, to feed it, raise it, bond with it, even when it makes no practical sense, and even when the animal could kill you, that impulse is older than agriculture. It is older than the village. It is older than the dog. What unites every animal on this list is not that we succeeded. Mostly we didn't. What unites them is the reaching itself, the strange, persistent, deeply human refusal to accept that anything is too wild, too dangerous, or too divine to be brought close. We have been doing it since the Ice Age. We are almost certainly doing it right now, with something, somewhere. It may be the most human thing we do. And notice what the reaching was for, because it was almost never simple usefulness. A fox in a grave is not livestock. A bear raised as a child and sent home as a god is not a farm animal. A crocodile in golden earrings, a lion at the foot of a throne, a cheetah hooded on a king's saddle, a cassowary chick in a rainforest camp. These were not, for the most part, about calories or labor. They were about meaning, about status and worship and companionship, and the sheer assertion that a human being could stand beside the most fearsome creatures in the world and call them, however briefly, mine. Long before animals were tools, they were symbols and gods and friends. The taming on this list is less the story of how we fed ourselves than the story of how we located ourselves, how we decided where we stood in relation to everything else that was alive and could kill us. If this got you to the end, subscribe. There is far more of this hidden history, the strange, true record of what our ancestors actually did, and we are going to keep digging it up. And in the comments, tell me 2 things. Which of these 10 did you have no idea about until now? And the one I really want to know, if you could go back and try to tame exactly one of them, the cheetah on its leash, the bear cub by the fire, the fox in the firelight, or the cassowary with the blade on its foot, which would you choose, knowing it might be the last thing you ever did? Until next time.